a sophomore in high school, and fortunately I went to a really great school that actually had a photography class. It allowed us access to a darkroom. We learned to develop rolls of film. I loved it, and in fact I immediately went from taking regular photographs to playing in the darkroom with a process called photograms, where I would print something and then lay objects over and then add light, and it was something that the artist, photographer Man Ray had done in the 1920s in Paris, and I thought that was the coolest thing. So immediately took photography to another level to make it an art form, even as a sophomore in high school. The natural evolution, in my education was to go to a liberal arts college. I went to St. Lawrence University. I ended up studying art history. I went into, initially I was working with frame shops and art galleries, and it was really not a high paid position. So my mother, smart as she was, she convinced me to go to business school. And I went, what? Business school? I went into the corporate world after I finished Simmons. I knew I wanted to go into something slightly creative, and so marketing seemed to be the best place for me to go. And I ended up landing a position in direct mail marketing. I loved it at the time, and however, about 7 years into it, I decided that it might not be the best for me creatively, and I looked up the corporate ladder. I looked at what my boss's life looked like, and I just went, I don't know if I want to do this. I basically took a pay cut, a day off, and I started to work on building a business on the side. But I really didn't have a plan. You would think as an MBA I would have had a business plan. I had really no plan. I just knew I wanted out. I wanted to do my own thing, and I really, at that point, did not know how to run a portrait studio or a photography business, but I had totally the faith that I was going to make it happen. So I was going along doing everything and anything, and came to a point where I realized it wasn't very efficient. And so I needed to pick a lane, and I chose babies. So I developed an entire baby program from start to finish that was indoors, time sensitive, got to do it now, and it didn't matter whether, you didn't have to wait for a suntan, you didn't have to wait for a haircut, you didn't have to wait for losing 10 pounds. It was now. And that was a great business model for a number of years as I developed as a photographer. Roughly 20 years into my business, and I photographed everything and anything, and I was doing babies, but I knew that I needed to change things up and try offering something different. So some of my colleagues were offering these painted portraits where they would take a high quality digital file that they photographed and then collaborate with other artists to render it as a painting, print it to canvas, and do topical work on the stretch canvas, and offer that as an upgrade and as an add-on to their straight photography. And then I had an opportunity in 2018 to learn that process myself and not rely on other artists. So I did a crash course in both the electronic painting and rendering of the photograph in a painting software, as well as cracking open a set of oils, mixing paints, and doing the embellishments to that canvas. I believe in early 2019, I was making a presentation about my painting work to my local business group. After I was done, one of my colleagues walked up to me and said, "Do you ever work from other people's photographs?" And at the time I said, no, not really, because the work that I had been doing was off of really high quality photographic images that I rendered in the painting software. And he looked at me and sighed and went, "Oh." And so he looked really sad when he asked me the question. So I asked him back. I said, "Well, why did you ask me about working with other people's photos?" And he said, "Well, I have this photo of me and my dad, It's the only one where we're smiling and having a good time, and he's not with us anymore. So as you can imagine, my heart completely broke. And I said, well, Stevie, why don't you just send it to me? Why don't you just send it to me? Let me take a look. It was the first photograph that I had worked with that was not my own and was actually a teeny tiny, horrible quality photograph, but it had meaning. Because it was a selfie, his head was larger than his father's, so I actually had to reduce him slightly so that it would look logical once it got larger as a painting. What was really special about this painting is that this guy who lost his father had this painting created, and he gave it to his grandparents, his father's parents. And I knew from that moment what I did was really important, that I was not just making pretty pictures out of photographs. I was taking important photographs and snapshots and turning them into something really special and making really, I would say, meaningful art. So here I was at the time making most of my income from photographing families in person, and I thought, okay now, well, what if I never photographed another human being in person? What is my life going to look like? During the pandemic, I decided that I would market to a new audience to say, send me your photographs and let me create a piece of art for you. There's a lot more thought that can go into how does this photo translate into a painting? What's missing? What's in there that needs to be removed, taken out? How can it be made better? So the beauty of this skill set and having the painting skills is I can reimagine that photograph as something else. I can tell the story of that photograph better than the original photograph. So during the pandemic in 2020, I challenged myself with a few projects, and one of them was to work with an old family photo that was in black and white. So I had to prove to myself that I could take an old black and white and add color and transform it into a painting. So I took an old family photo of, I'm here on the end. And I picked this one because my mom's expression was really lovely, because it's all about the expression and the lighting on the face. So I took this old black and white photograph. I brought it first into Photoshop to add color to the image, and then I brought it into the painting software and rendered it as a painting through electronic brushwork. And I love it. I shared it with folks on social media right around Mother's Day of 2020, which was about a month and a half into the lockdown. And I have it hanging in my studio. I love looking at it every single day. The work I'm doing right now is a completely modern approach to painting commissions, where I am an alternative to a traditional oil painter. The way I do this is I work from an initial source photograph. I bring it into Photoshop, clean it up, resize it, add color if I need to, prep it to the size that I want it to be. Then I bring it into the painting software. And the painting software I use is called Corel Painter. It's basically the Photoshop of the painting world, and it has a million combinations of brushes. If I wanted my brush stroke to look like a wet, sloppy oil brush, I can do that. I can change the settings, make it look like a dry chalk. I can switch it again, make it a watercolor brush, change it again, do a blending so I can smear like as if I had an oily rag. Then I print it to canvas and then go through a series of coatings and glazings. And then the final application is oils, where I do glazing and actual oil paints where I'm mixing and really bringing it to life with glazes and textures so that in the end it looks like a finished oil painting. there's always a story, a meaning behind why that photograph deserves to be elevated to an art form. And so that's what's super exciting about what I'm doing now, is that I'm really telling people stories in a really unique way.